Are we heading for a recession? I saw some stats from Reuters saying the chances have gone up 45%, the highest since December 2023, because of the new tariffs.
It's interesting when people point like the odds of recession at 45% because they can't be wrong. Like if there isn't a recession, they'd be like, yeah, we said it was 45%. We didn't say it was going to happen. So my answer, if you said, are we heading for a recession, would always be yes. If you asked me a year ago, if you asked me 5 years ago, like historically, there's a recession. In modern times, it's been every 4 to 5 years that it's occurred. And so we shouldn't pretend that when they happen, that they're this crazy out of the blue thing. It's an inevitable feature that you're always going to have recessions. But is this going to cause it?
What is a recession?
A recession technically is when GDP in the economy, GDP is just like economic output, how much the economy is moving. When that declines for 2 quarters in a row, that's the technical definition. For most people, you don't need to worry about technical definitions because a recession in your mind is when you are feeling worse off economically for a long period of time. When you feel like you can't get a job or your neighbors, your roommates can't get jobs and it's starting to hurt on you. It's kind of like, what's the definition of being sick? Well, it's when you don't feel good, but you can get more technical than that. But a recession for most people is when you don't feel good economically.
You're really not worried we might be heading into a recession?
It's not that I'm not concerned, but it would be like saying if you live in Florida, are you concerned about hurricanes? The answer is yes, you should be concerned about hurricanes, but you also know with 100% certainty that they're going to come. If you choose to live in Florida and you live in Florida for 40 years, you know you're going to get hit by one, 100% chance. And so it's not that I don't worry about it, it's that I think it is inevitable. Always, no matter what's going on. This has nothing to do with tariffs. That's always been the case. And so this is where, at the individual level, personally, like room for error in your finances is so critical. What I mean by that is just like savings, cushion, being scared of debt. It's when you're gainfully employed and you have a good paycheck and the stock market's going up and Bitcoin's going up, everyone feels great. You feel amazing. And it's very rare in that situation that you want to envision yourself losing your job or losing a job and not being able to find another one for 6 months or needing to move or getting divorced or having a medical illness. Like no one wants to envision that. But the truth is, like, what are the odds that at least one of these will happen to you and I over the next 30 years? Major job loss or just a major impact in our businesses. Divorce, cancer, wayward children. I can go on down. What are the odds that at least one of those will occur to you and I in 30 years?
Very high.
100%. Yeah. And for a lot of people, they'll experience all of those. And so the idea that life is fragile, and the economy is fragile, countries are fragile, is like people don't necessarily want to admit that because it's hard to get out of bed in the morning if you admit that to yourself. But I think it's inevitable. And it doesn't have to be necessarily scary if you have the right like psychology around it of just, yeah, like when times are good, I don't expect them to last forever. That's not how the world works. And the right finances around it of like, yeah, when times are good, I'm going to save because I know this might not last forever. And what I value more than anything with money is independence. It's not flashy cars or homes. I want to be independent so that when the economy goes south and there is a recession and things are going bad, I want to have a level of control over where I work, where I live, what I'm able to do, my ability to support my family. That's the top of the list. And so when things are going well, and for a lot of people, they haven't for the last couple of years, but for a lot of people, they did. I think that's always important is like, I think it's a major psychological skill in life in general. This goes beyond money, is recognizing when things are abnormally good and preparing yourself for them to go the other way as they inevitably will.
How can I achieve financial freedom in a world that's changing so fast with things like tariffs, AI, recessions, and politics? Should I focus on a strategy, a mindset, or something else to survive all this and come out with real independence?
This sounds like such a squishy BS kind of answer, but I think there's a lot of truth to this, and I'll explain in a second. It is largely a mindset. And that sounds crazy, but I'll explain what I mean. My grandmother-in-law, she passed away a couple years ago. She was 92 when she passed away. She, for 30 years, she lived off of nothing but Social Security. I think she got $1,700 a month from Social Security, and she had nothing else. No savings, no pension, no nothing. She was the happiest person. I've met half a dozen billionaires in my life. I'm sure you have as well. None of them were as happy as she was. And she was like financially broke, but she had this level of psychological wealth that was like unparalleled. And the reason was off $1,700 a month, that was all she needed. She was perfectly happy toiling in her garden, watching birds, going for walks, hanging out, reading from books from the library, perfectly content with all of that. She didn't need anything else. So she had very little money, but she wanted even less. And so like she had a level of independence that a lot of billionaires do not. Because if you are a billionaire, if you have $1 billion in the bank, but you are so encumbered by your business, your employees, your suppliers, your customers, you're waking up at 3 a.m. sweating because you got this email and you're stressed out about it, you actually have very little independence in that situation. Your shareholders or regulators are coming down on you. I mean, we see this. There's no one in particular here, but we've seen very wealthy people kind of become sycophants to politicians. And the truth is a lot of those like mega billionaires absolutely rely on politicians and regulators to keep their machine moving. And so my grandmother-in-law on $1,700 a month had a higher level of independence than a lot of those people do. And that's why I say like a lot of this is a mindset, because the truth is the vast majority of people listening to this could have a level of independence. It's not that you can retire tomorrow, but you can have a level of financial independence once you realize that the key is managing your expectations more than it is how can I just pile up as much money as I possibly can. It's easy to think like, how do you become financially independent? Like save a ton of money. And there's truth to that. Of course, that's part of it. But more of it is just in like, what kind of life do you want to live? Because if your expectations are growing faster than your net worth, it's never going to feel like you'll never be independent. Never. You have $100 billion, but if you want more and more and more, like it's never going to feel like it's enough. Mm-hmm. Or if you enjoy bird watching and reading books, like my grandmother-in-law, $1,700 a month, you're all set. You're set for 30 years.
You're rich.
You're rich.
I'm free.
She was psychologically rich, even if she was financially poor. And I think that's the biggest thing about it. Adam Smith, who was the greatest economist to ever live, this was 300 years ago, he once wrote about this. He was like, why do people work so hard? And he was just like, there's a simple question, but why do people work so damn hard? And he's like, it can't just be for our sustenance, because even poor people, as he was writing about it, had homes and adequate food most of the time. He's like, there has to be something else. And what that something else was, he wrote, was to be seen by other people. And it was attention and admiration. They wanted to be getting rich so that they could have a bigger house and a nice car, not in his day, but they wanted attention from other people. But he was like, it's not that you needed the money, because even in his day, 300 years ago in Scotland, I think he was like, look, people have homes and food. Like, what are they doing this for? And he was not criticizing them. Like, his whole point was like, they're going out and innovating. We're going to have great technology. And like, it's great to go do that. But the reason to do it was not because they had to stop. Now, of course, most people to get shelter and food do have to keep working, but they're working more than they absolutely need to because they want something else besides independence.
With everything going on, tariffs, talk of a recession, what should regular people who don't really follow the economy be thinking about to protect themselves?
This is less advice going forward, more than just like something to remember next time, which is that if you're worried about being laid off, if you're a small business owner worried about going under, the need for room for error and cushion and savings and backup plans were just as important a month ago as they are today. You're just learning how important they are today. And I challenge you to remember that in the future, when this is all over, whenever it's all over, that when the economy is going well and you feel stable in your job, stable in your career, that is when you absolutely need backup plans and room for error and savings and eschewing debt and whatnot. I have a very high level of cash as a percentage of my net worth. And a lot of financial advisors would look at that and say, like, what are you saving for? Like, what's going on here? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm saving for a world that I know is very fragile. And I have no idea what's going to happen to me personally or what's going to happen to the economy. But if you're a lay student of history, you know that things break all the time. And so my advice to you, if you're realizing that for the first time, that how fragile the world can be and how the job security that you thought you had might not have been as strong, remember this next time, how important room for error and backup plans are.
How much do you think someone should have saved compared to their monthly expenses?
It's so hard for that because everyone's I'm sure people watching this will be in a massive range of incomes. I would say this is a bad answer that no one's going to like, but as pretty much as you can. I mean, I'll give you one example of this. When COVID first hit in March of 2020, the average restaurant I heard had enough cash on hand to last them for 14 days. And then all of a sudden they were looking at a 6-month lockdown. And so I think one answer to that question is however much you think you'll need, it's probably more. The other more practical example of this is in 2008 during the financial crisis. A lot of people were losing their jobs, not for 2 weeks or 1 month, but they were losing their jobs for 12 months. And they got unemployment benefits, but it wasn't enough. And so is it practical to say like you should have 12 months of saving? It's probably not practical for a lot of people. But the answer is as much as you can while realizing that the world is more fragile than you probably think it is.
When you think about wealthy people throughout history, what money principles would you teach someone to help them build the right mindset?
It's hard for a parent. I'm not filthy rich by any means, but I've sold a couple books, and it's hard as a parent to be like, I want to use money to give you a good life, but I don't want to spoil you. The last thing I want is for you to be a spoiled little brat. And it's very difficult for a lot of parents to do that. And so one of the things that I want him to learn about money, and I want him to learn it in a very stark way, is like, learn the scarcity and the value of $1. And I think the only way to do that is to experience it firsthand. So when he was born 9 years ago, I wrote him a little letter and I published this on a blog. And one of the things I said was, I hope you're poor one day. And I said, not struggling, not broke, but I hope the only way to understand the value of $1 is to experience the power of its scarcity. And I hope there's a period when my wife and I are able to say like, look, like you're never going to fall flat on your face. You're not going to be homeless. You're always going to have good health care. But I hope you're able to experience the scarcity of $1 so you value it. I did. My parents taught me that in a way that they didn't need to, but they let me be poor for a while. And most people will experience it because they have, that's the situation they're in. So that's one thing I think about and I think actually quite a few families deal with that is like, how can you help your kids? And it goes beyond money. This is, so many, the helicopter parent era is, I want to protect you from downside at all cost, emotional downside. And I think money is one of many topics in which you're going to learn the best by experiencing the downside.
If someone's got around $1,000 a month to spare and has never heard of compounding before, how would you explain it in the simplest way so they really get how powerful it can be over time?
So take index funds, which are just a very simple collection of businesses at a very low fee. You can buy one stock, but it's a collection of hundreds and hundreds of different businesses. You own Apple and Amazon and Coca-Cola. You own all the companies in the world. And so it's the most boring, bland, average way to invest. If you invest in that in a very simple way, and you do that consistently for 20 or 30 years, with no skill, with no expertise, where you're not getting stock tips from anyone, it's the most boring way to invest. If you do it consistently for 30 years, you will almost certainly end up in the top 1% of investors. You will almost certainly beat literally 95% of Wall Street pros who were trying to outsmart the market, trying to outwit the market, and were unable to keep it going for 30 years. And so this is where if you can just be average for an above average period of time, you'll be amazing. I mean, it's probably similar in health that like, if you want to be healthy, yes, you can go out and become the best bodybuilder in the world, the best marathon runner in the whole world. But actually, if you just work out, just like modest workouts a couple times a week for 30 years, you're going to be one of the healthiest people in your town. If you can work out 2 or 3 times a week for 30 years consistently and eat a good diet consistently for 30 years, you'll be one of the healthiest people that you know. And it's the same in investing. It's like the people who do the best are not the geniuses. It's the people who are ordinary for a very long period of time.
If I skipped my $5 coffee and invested it at 8% a year, could that really grow to over $400,000 in 40 years? Is that how compounding works?
If you did a coffee every day.
Yes.
Yes.
Assuming the coffee costs $5.
Now, I like coffee. You do too. I don't want people to listen to that and say I should stop drinking my coffee, but it's a powerful example. There's a book called The Snowball, which is kind of the most detailed biography of Warren Buffett. And it would talk about how when he was on his adulthood, he wouldn't want to get haircuts because in his mind, a haircut would cost $10,000 because it was a $2 haircut. But if he invested that money in the way that he knew he could and leave it alone for 50 years, whatever it would be. He didn't want to get a car wash because he would tell his wife, he's like, that's a $5,000 car wash. She's like, what do you mean? It costs $1. She's like, no. But if I invest that money and leave it alone. So he was always thinking about not what something costs today, but what he could grow that money into in the future. That's why he's worth $250 billion today, is because you go through 90 years of thinking like that, and it really adds up. Now, you always have to preface this by being like, please drink your coffee and get a haircut. It's always a balance, but also understand how incredible it can be by doing very ordinary things for a long period of time can lead to magic.
It is magic as well. That's such a perfect word for it, because it seems...
It's magic because it's not intuitive at all.
Yes.
You don't understand it. You're like, wait, what? I can't understand how a haircut can turn into $10 million.
Yeah.
It's not intuitive. Like we're not. There's a great example from my friend Michael Batnick. He said, if I ask you, what is 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8? You can figure that out in your head quickly. But if I said, what is 8 times 8 times 8 times 8 times 8? Forget about it. Can't do it. We're not made to think exponentially. We're not meant to think in multiplicative terms.
Because nothing was exponential once upon a time.
That's largely true, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I can't think of anything that was really exponential before.
Yeah, I'm sure we could come up with a couple examples in nature and whatnot. There's lots of compounding in nature, and that's kind of the core of evolution, is like things building upon each other over time.
Oh yeah, maybe brushing your teeth or decay.
Yeah,
would be considered to be
but certainly the stock market is the most pertinent example in most people's lives. But there's also a lot of like bad habits compound. Smoking one cigarette is not that big a deal. Smoking one cigarette every day for 30 years, big deal. Smoking 2 packs a day for 30 years, big deal. Mm-hmm. So there are things that like in small doses, they're not that big a deal. But if you do them consistently for a long period of time, it leads to negative magic.
What's your view then on saving money?
I view savings as, well, one thing, most people view saving money as idle saving. Like if you're not spending it, it's just sitting in the bank doing nothing. And it's just it's just wasted money sitting there. I've never viewed it like that at all. I view savings as little tokens of independence. And every dollar that I save is a little piece of my time in the future that I own and I control. It's just deferred spending. And I view that as independence. So if you have a lot of savings, it's not just like hoarding money and I'm not going to do anything with it. And it's not even that I'm saving this money so that I can spend it in the future. If I save $1 today, I have $1 more independence today. I benefit from that today, right now. Like I feel more independent because of it. And I am more independent because of it. So I view, again, my top financial goal by far, and I think this is true for most people, whether they know it or not, what they really want out of money is independence and autonomy. And just being able to do things on their own terms, live the life that they want to live. And I view the oxygen of independence is savings.
And what's the opposite of that? Is it debt?
Debt is a piece of your future that somebody else owns. It's the polar opposite of it. When you go into debt, you're saying 3 years from now, this company owns a part of my time. They own my labor in the future. And savings is the opposite. Savings is in the future. I have this stored up. I have this consumption stored up in the future. I can do whatever I want with it.
How do you balance YOLO, enjoying life now, with saving and investing for the future?
I think about a thing when I was in my early 20s at this point, and there was a coworker of mine, and he was 10 years older than me, and he had $25,000 of credit card debt, which I could not fathom at the time. That was such an incomprehensible amount of credit card debt that he was paying 17% interest on, and at the time I just thought, and all the debt came from trips that he had taken. He traveled Europe and traveled through Asia and had a great time doing it, but he put it all on his credit card. At the time, I remember thinking, you idiot, do you understand what this is going to do to your future? And then he died when he was about 32.
Wow.
And then I remember thinking like, I'm so glad you took those trips. I'm so glad you went into that credit card debt, because the truth was that at age 32, he had seen more and done more than most people would at age 62. And so I think about that a lot of like, it's always a balance. And the truth is that you and I don't know, are we going to live until we're 110 or die tomorrow? Nobody knows, of course. One thing I think a lot about as a parent is that I've been a big saver my entire life. Since I got my first job at age 16, I've saved the majority of what I made in every job that I've ever been in. And it would be easy to look at someone like me and say, Morgan, if you were on your deathbed tomorrow, you'd probably regret the vacations you didn't take and the dinners you didn't have, right? You would regret that. My answer is absolutely not, because if I was on my deathbed tonight, I would take so much joy knowing that my wife and kids are going to be okay because of what I saved. That would be the worst situation I would be in, is on my deathbed and looking at my wife and kids and knowing you guys are screwed. I'm leaving you debt, And so, but that might change as I get older. And so when my kids are hopefully financially self-sufficient, will I still think that? Will I still have that need to be like, I need to work and save to provide for my young kids? That's not going to last forever. So it'll change throughout your life.
Sometimes I think if I died tomorrow, I'd feel like I really lived. I've traveled, met people, taken risks. But at the same time, I know I should plan for the future. How do you find that balance between living now and being smart with money?
Between my friend who buried himself in credit card debt, even though I'm glad he did it given his short life, versus the people who save everything for the end. David Cassidy, who's a very famous childhood actor and had an incredible acting career. He died, I don't know when he died, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was. His last words were, "So much wasted time." Those are his last words. And you think about, and this is someone who was very rich and famous, had a very enviable life. And you can't think of sadder last words than "so much wasted time." And I think no matter, this is the Jeff Bezos philosophy on business was, he started Amazon because he was trying to imagine himself at age 90, looking back and having the fewest regrets. He was like, that should be your framework for life, is that when you're on your deathbed, you have the fewest regrets possible. And he did it because he was like, if I don't start Amazon, I'm going to regret it. But if I do start Amazon and it fails, I won't regret that. So just understanding, I think that's a good philosophy. That's probably the broadest definition of risk, is understanding what you're likely to regret in the future. And I don't think anyone has a perfect calibration on that. There's a good chance that, heaven forbid, if you did get a diagnosis tomorrow, as you just said, that yes, you would look back and say, man, I really went for it. But you also might look back and be like, man, and not you individually, but any of us would look back and say man, I wish I had done this differently. I wish I was nicer to that person. I wish I had called this person more, And not a single of those people looking back in those situations on their deathbed when they're 90 years old will look back and say, I wish I worked harder. Yeah. But virtually every one of them will say, I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I spent more time with my family. I wish I was nicer to myself. I wish I'd let myself be who I actually was.
For someone who's stuck in debt and struggling with bills, how can they start working toward financial independence? It doesn't seem like saving alone is enough, is it?
It's difficult because it's likely that the mindset and psychology that got you there is going to be very difficult to break, extremely difficult to break. I heard this statistic one time, this is a completely different topic, but I think this applies to a lot of things, that the statistic that is most predictive on whether you will cheat on your spouse is how many people you slept with before you got married. The implication being, it's very difficult to just flip a switch and say, I'm a different person now. And I think that that idea can apply to a lot of different things in life. And the psychology of, I spend way more than I make and I don't care about money and debt. Some people can wake up one day and say, no more of that. I'm going to run in the other way. A lot of people find it very difficult to do. I think one of the hard things about money that's hard to admit for a lot of people, but there's truth to it, is that on the nature-nurture spectrum, a lot of it does lean towards nature, that some people are just wired. Your brother was wired to plan and save, and you were wired to take entrepreneurial risks in maybe a way that he wasn't. And so a lot of it is, yes, you can learn. Yes, you can learn from others and learn new ideas to think about, but we shouldn't pretend that we can fundamentally rewire who we are.
Are there any tips to help people who work in factories and don't have much extra money each month save effectively?
I think if you view savings as, I need to save for something in the future, that's hard for people to do. If you have a little bit of a mindset shift and say, I'm going to save so I can become more independent, so that if I lose my job, I don't have to panic and go find the first one that's available. I can take my time and find another one. That's independence. If you have a medical emergency, you're going to have some options on how to treat it and where to go. That's independence. Viewing every dollar that you save as a token of independence, I think is a mindset shift that makes it a lot easier for people to do versus if they're just saying, I need to save to buy a new car.